something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs, mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Paranoia strikes deep into your life, it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. We better stop. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop. What's that sound?
Called American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation. Seth, thank you so much for coming to us today.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So the premise of your book, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the deep political divisions that we see today actually aren't new. And they have historical roots, which most of us aren't aware of, unfortunately, because if we were, we'd know that there have always been two Americas since the Enlightenment and the founding of the nation. And the big reveal of your research, though, is that it was never the Enlightenment. There were, in fact, two rival Enlightenments. And that rivalry not only explains the mess we're in today, but also how to get out of it. Is that a fair overview?
I would say that that's exactly right. Part of the difficulty is that people think that we're in an unprecedented time with the divisions in the country. And what the book does, American Schism, is it goes back and does a tracing of the history of this divide, which is not new. It goes way back to our founding, to the 18th century.
Now a look at our current political divisions through a historical lens. Yuval Levin is founder and editor of the quarterly journal National Affairs. His new book, focused on giant thinkers of the late 1700s, is called The Great Debate: Edmund Burke, Thomas Paine, and the Birth of Left and Right. Yuval Levin joins us now, and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So why did you think it was necessary to go back, over 200 years to these great thinkers, writers who disagreed over the French Revolution to help us understand more about what we're going through today?
Well, this is a book about the roots of our political differences. It's easy looking at our politics now to take for granted the left and the right. We've always had a broadly conservative party in our politics, a broadly progressive party. They've always been at each other's throats, and it's easy to just assume that that's what our political discourse looks like. This book says, rather than take it for granted, let's think about what it is and where it comes from and why. And one good way to do that is to think about the first real instance of a recognizable left-right divide, which we find in an intense ideological debate that was taking place in Britain and in America at the end of the 18th century, in a period that we identify with the American Revolution and the French Revolution, but that was also about a struggle to define the free society, a struggle about the tension between progress and tradition that's still very much with us, but that can be difficult to discern beneath the intense debates about particular policy questions that our politics are about.
This video is brought to you by Captivating History. The Gilded Age is often seen as a high point in America's history. Characterized by the rise of the industrialized economy after the Civil War, it was a time when American business took off on a grand scale, making several notable business people extremely wealthy. However, although the Gilded Age is remembered as a time of great affluence, it was also a time of great inequality and corruption. Even the phrase, the Gilded Age, was taken from a satirical novel by Mark Twain, published in 1873. It is supposed to imply that something that appears golden on the surface may be corrupt underneath. Shortly after the end of the American Civil War in 1865, the U.S. underwent an enormous burst of economic activity brought about by a wave of industrialization during the renewed peace. The Gilded Age normally refers to this prosperous period between 1870 and 1900, which overlaps with the latter part of the Reconstruction. While the Civil War had some devastating effects on the U.S., it also inaugurated important changes, including the spread of the telegraph and a major expansion of the railways. Within a few years of the end of the war, America also began to experience a period of major economic growth. While the industrial period had begun in Great Britain in the 18th century, America experienced its most intense period of industrial development during the late 19th century. In many ways, America had been long destined for the spectacular spurt of economic growth, blessed with a continent of valuable resources, including coal and oil and many useful agricultural products.
Another characteristic, as Shailene said, of the Gilded Age was this extreme partisan polarization. Basically, by every possible measure, there was just no bipartisan collaboration. But then, again, in about 1910, that begins to change, and we begin to have the beginnings of some bipartisan collaboration, and that steadily rises up through World War II, through the 50s, into the 60s, and then suddenly it's 1965, and that changes, and our viewers will know that part of it, because we know, I mean, right, you know, today we've learned about how polarized America is today, so everybody knows about the polarization now. But what people don't know is that was actually, it wasn't always not. There were times in living memory, Americans were becoming less polarized, more cooperative, and finally there's this cultural business that is this degree to which Americans were, pardon me, culturally very self-centered, very focused on me in the Gilded Age, and then that begins to turn too. And gradually, as we reach up into the 50s and 60s, we can have a greater sense that we're all in this together. And then, just like clockwork, in 1964, about all those trends, we become steadily less focused on what we have in common and more focused on I, and more, I would say, narcissistic. And I'm choosing that word partly because it describes the way the culture has been, but also it's not escaped my mind. I don't want to get too partisan here, but we happen to have a president now who kind of embodies some of these trends. I want to be clear. President Trump did not cause these trends. These trends began long before him. I'm not trying to blame him for all of this.